The world in the mirror. How wonderful. It seemed like Weiss was just an ordinary second daughter of a wealthy family, but she could wield a high level of inscription power. A pure white formation unfolded beneath her feet and slowly spread until it enclosed Lin Yi and the others behind her. Take a step forward, Weiss ordered. Lin Yi patted Gwen on the back. Gwen glanced back, realized her heels weren't fully inside the formation, and hopped forward. Humph, how cute. Get ready, everyone, Weiss said. We're about to enter an inverted world. She closed her eyes, holding the formation steady. Has everyone checked they're inside the formation? Uh-huh. Standing ready. No problem. Everyone nodded. Very well, then. Weiss gripped her sword with both hands and drove it into the salt flat. The moment the blade pierced the salt, the white formation flared, and Lin Yi and the others were flipped into another dimension, the dimension of inscriptions. Wow! What a magical experience. Where are we now? After the flip, Gwen looked around. The scene looked the same and completely different at the same time. There was no one here but them, an azure sky, white clouds, lake water as smooth as a mirror, and a cool breeze. Nothing else. This is the world of inscriptions, Weiss said slowly. Also a lost inscription ruin. She rose, and still maintaining the formation, flicked her sword to conjure a dazzling white beacon to light the way. Humph, I didn't expect the legendary mirror of the sky, the Uyuni salt flat, to hide such a big secret. Mirror, mirror, which side is real and which is false? Lin Yi grinned, putting on an absurdly profound tone. What are you talking about? Why does everything suddenly sound like a riddle? Gwen rolled her eyes. I mean, isn't the deepest thing hidden always yourself, the world inside the mirror? Gwen countered. Everyone thinks the mirror world is just a reflection of the real world, so no one suspects the real treasure is hidden right here. Now that you say it like that, it does make sense, Lin Yi agreed. Who was the first to find this ruin? Gwen asked. Who figured out it was hidden here? He must have been a genius, she continued. Lin Yi chuckled. Actually, it was Sherlock. Oh, right. You all let him study the inscription history scrolls. It must have been him who discovered it. Weiss said softly. Damn, Lin Yi said, placing his hands on his hips and pretending to sulk. Feels like there's no need to praise him then. What's wrong with praising Sherlock as a genius? Gwen asked. If he found it, it's not genius. It's obvious, Lin Yi said. It would be strange if he didn't find it. Everyone blinked at Lin Yi's odd standard for genius. Come on, girls. It's Holmes. Do you really think it's surprising for Holmes to find a little hidden secret? Oh, now that you say it like that, I get it, Gwen said, nodding. Right, if it's Holmes. It would be strange if he hadn't discovered it, Weiss agreed. So why does everyone assume discoveries like this are natural for him? Raven asked, still clearly inexperienced. Lin Yi smiled and gave Raven another head pat. It worked like a charm. You'll learn with time, he said. These things aren't obscure or difficult. They're just pleasant. All right, Gwen smiled, taking Lin Yi's hand. Come on, little spider. Hold my hand like Raven does. Hear my heart. It'll calm you down. Okay, Raven said, less nervous already. Their affectionate atmosphere left Weiss speechless. Ha, I didn't expect being the leader to be so hard, she complained, shaking her head. Don't worry. After the mission, I'll give you a sweet kiss as a reward. That'll do. Weiss brightened. Can I have two? Greedy, Lin Yi teased. But I'm working hard. Gwen and Raven can hold hands with you the whole time, and I'm up front maintaining the inscription power to guide everyone. It's unfair. Weiss puffed her cheeks. All right, two. But don't raise the price later, or not only will you lose the kiss, I'll flick your forehead as punishment. How can you be like that? That's unreasonable. Weiss's little scheme amused Gwen and Raven. Lin Yi had expected as much. Two's not enough for such a long road, he joked, and the group bantered on until the silence made the place feel oppressive. Weiss frowned. There's nothing else here. The scenery is pretty, but stay too long and the world presses down on you. It's a suffocating kind of silence. Exactly, that's the feeling. It's terrifying, Gwen shivered, hair rising. I feel fine, Raven said coolly. As the daughter of a demon, her adaptability to extremes showed. Could we talk more? Without noise, I feel like this world is about to crush me, Gwen begged. Gladly. Lin Yi grinned and kept up a running commentary, and the chatter eased the tension. Behind him, the loving pair made Weiss mutter in resignation. Then the white light Weiss was maintaining suddenly faded. Huh? What's this? Everyone stopped. The light sank slowly into the lake and vanished beneath the surface. Swish! A passage opened in front of Weiss, parting the water like a path. Everyone froze, so it was a sea beneath them, not a lake. Why hadn't they fallen in? Had entering the mirror dimension given them the power to walk on water, like some miracle? It was hard to believe. Sherlock told us this inscription ruin was originally a ruin under the sea, Weiss said, explaining. A ruin in the sea? Gwen echoed. Yes, but for reasons unknown, it's now hidden inside the Uni salt flat, within the mirror of the sky's world. Would Aquaman of Atlantis know anything about it? Lin Yi speculated. Aquaman? He doesn't even know his own Atlantis history. Why would he know about this? Weiss shot back, bringing Lin Yi back down. Not every hero is balanced, she thought. Most are lopsided. Those with strength lack brains, and those with brains lack strength. Classic unbalanced stats. 42. The price of genius. You know, so we're going down now? I think so. Step by step, following the stairs that gradually appeared, Lin Yi and the others descended nearly 100 meters before they reached the inscription ruins lying dormant in the Sea of Mirrors. The ruined temple was covered in countless strange characters. Some of them Lin Yi could even identify as ancient oracle bone script. Star, moon, seal, he read aloud. You can read the inscriptions? Weiss stared at him, astonished. No, I don't actually understand them, Lin Yi said, but some of the characters are clearly oracle bone script. If I'm not mistaken, this temple must be from before 256 BC. Is it that old? Gwen asked, puzzled. Probably. These inscriptions seem to be the work of many ancient civilizations, Lin Yi explained. Not just oracle bone script, there's hieroglyphics, cuneiform, Mayan glyphs. Some parts are legible, but other segments look fused together, like features from two or more scripts combined. But there are still a lot I can't make sense of, no matter how I look at them, he added, closing his eyes and shaking his head. Deciphering the full history carved into the walls was beyond him. Wow, how do you know so much? Gwen exclaimed. I'm a genius, you know. I was born with it. Lin Yi shrugged, grinning. Silence. The remark left the group speechless. Then the sea rumbled. What? Raven spun around as the separated wall of water that had been held back around the ruins began to close in. Into the ruins! Lin Yi shouted and sprinted for the temple entrance. Gwen, Raven, and Weiss followed close behind. The stone door of the temple had been open for thousands of years. At a glance, Weiss and the others felt uneasy about hiding inside, but Gwen called out, "Shouldn't we close the door?" Without thinking, Weiss and Raven stepped forward and pushed. The three girls threw their strength into it. Their combined might, aided by small bits of magic and ancient power, was formidable. The massive stone slab began to budge. Lin Yi didn't interrupt them. He walked over to the wall beside the door, having noticed a loosening stone block with a gap and scratch marks from friction. He reached out and pressed it. Rumble! The heavy stone door that the girls were pressing slowly slid closed. Gwen, puffing and proud, cried, "We did it! Push harder!" When the door slammed shut, a boom echoed as the last of the seawater was kept at bay. Everyone breathed out together. "Whew, that was close," Gwen said, wiping her forehead. She, Weiss, and Raven turned to look at Lin Yi, whose hand still rested on the recessed block in the wall. They all felt their intelligence had just taken a hit. Lin Yi gave them a thumbs up. "Nice work, girls. You proved you're strong." Gwen and the others flushed, half embarrassed, half pleased. "Okay, let's go deeper and see what's inside," Lin Yi said, releasing the block and stepping into the temple. An awkward silence followed. Just now, were the three of us really shoving a self-closing stone door like idiots? Gwen mumbled. "Let's forget it," Raven said quickly, and they agreed to bury the embarrassing bit in the past. "But I didn't realize the seawater would have a time limit." Lin Yi took point, moving carefully through the dim corridors. Who knew what traps or guardians might remain? He wasn't going to let Weiss and the others act as test subjects. If things get dangerous, we can always use the key Wan Fu gave us to return to the real world, Weiss said. That should make things a lot safer. True. Lin Yi smiled, but as soon as he finished speaking, some kind of sixth sense, stranger and sharper than a spider sense, made him freeze in place. What's wrong? One of the girls whispered. Lin Yi made a quick hush gesture. They held still. Quietly but unmistakably, a white spirit giant about 4 or 5 meters tall emerged soundlessly from the wall to Lin Yi's left. Weiss, Raven, and Gwen tensed for a fight, but Lin Yi's warning kept them pinned in place. The giant turned its head toward them, stared for a heartbeat, then slid back into the wall and vanished as silently as it had appeared. The girls let out a collective sigh. "What was that thing?" Gwen asked. "I don't know," Weiss admitted. "This is my first time here, too." "Lin Yi, how did you know it wouldn't attack?" Raven asked, impressed. "Just experience and a genius's reflexes," Lin Yi said with a little laugh. They all sighed inwardly at his usual line. Raven rolled her eyes. "Is it really just because you're a genius?" "Then you are the most genius I've ever seen," Raven grumbled. Lin Yi's smile turned more serious for a moment. "Becoming a genius costs something." Raven nudged him. "What price?" He didn't dodge the question. "Everything. Sometimes you're everything. Even life and death can lose their meaning." Silence settled over them. Lin Yi's words carried a weight the others felt in their bones. Then, as if to soften the moment, he shifted back into his joking tone. "All right, that's why I said not everyone can be a genius. Ha! Don't envy me too much." He laughed, light and careless. The girls relaxed, smiles returning. But despite the banter, a seed of curiosity had been planted. They were more eager than ever to know the secrets Lin Yi kept. After all, who wouldn't want to learn everything about someone they liked? Speaking of which, why does your family need the power of inscriptions so badly? Lin Yi asked Weiss with a smile, glancing around the ruins. Most ordinary tycoons don't need to be that strong, do they? Not everyone has to be a billionaire who stays up all night fighting crime. Wait, are you saying Bruce Wayne, the head of Wayne Enterprises, is actually Batman? Weiss blurted. Gwen and Raven reacted with the same stunned, scandalized expressions. "No way," Raven echoed. Lin Yi blinked. "Isn't that common knowledge? In my world, Bruce Wayne is Batman. Apparently here, not many people know." They stared at him like he dropped a bomb. Gwen's eyes widened in delight. "So the super-rich capitalist is secretly Batman, fighting crime in Gotham. That's kind of magical." "Why can't a billionaire be Batman?" Weiss sniffed, affronted. "I've always thought rich people were overly protective of their own lives and indifferent to ordinary people, but that doesn't include my adorable little Weiss." Gwen, sensing an opening, immediately snuggled up closer to Weiss to curry favor. "Weiss isn't like that at all. Someone as exceptional as you has to be rare in this world. Most of the rich we know, Rex, Kingpin, Penguin, they do horrible things. To be wealthy and still keep a pure heart, that's rarer than rare. Maybe less than 0.01%. Lin Yi corrected his earlier casual remark. "So I don't worry about what you'll do with power. I know you, Weiss, wouldn't use it for evil. Same with Gwen and Raven. You're good people." He let the pause hang, then steered the conversation. "But what about everyone else? Take Rex as an example. At first, his reasons for opposing Superman weren't wrong. He believed humanity shouldn't rely on some godlike outsider. People should save themselves and control their own destiny. So he wanted to prove that human strength could surpass Superman, that we could be our own heroes. That wasn't unreasonable. Do you girls think his original motive was wrong?" "No," they all said after a moment. "It wasn't wrong. It made sense." But after repeated losses to Superman, Rex's initial goal warped. Proving humanity's strength turned into proving his own. Looking down on Superman became outright hatred. Now, he isn't the principled Rex he once was. He's consumed with destroying Superman at all costs. Lin Yi looked at Weiss. "My point is, if one day someone in your family gains tremendous power and your family starts to change, what will you do? If they begin down a dangerous path like Rex did, will you support them or try to stop them?" Weiss understood immediately and fell silent for a moment. "I would support your choices, even if they were right or wrong. Because I'm your girlfriend," Lin Yi said, grinning, and Weiss turned bright red. "But I'm not sure Gwen and Raven would agree," he continued. "So if it came down to it, would you want me to back you up or to pull you out?" Weiss stared at his steady face, then glanced at Gwen and Raven. "Humph. Even though I'm a member of the Schnee family, if my family ever truly heads down an irredeemable path, I, Weiss Schnee, will absolutely not let them go all the way. I'm loyal to my family, but I won't enable evil for my own selfish reasons. If I start slipping into darkness, Jack, Gwen, Raven, slap me hard and drag me back. I beg you." Her voice was resolute, her confidence infectious. Lin Yi smiled in relief, and Gwen and Raven relaxed. Gwen snuggled Weiss again. "That makes me feel so much better. Actually, from the moment we entered this temple, my sixth sense went into overdrive." "Sixth sense?" the others echoed. "It's like a woman's intuition, but steadier and stronger," Gwen said. "My sixth sense kept screaming at me that if any of us relaxed, we'd all die during this exploration." "Die?" Raven shot a look at Gwen. Gwen nodded. "Not just a normal death. Death under the temple's weird causal rules." Lin Yi leaned forward. "That's exactly what I felt. It wasn't a prediction, so much as a sense of causality, the pattern of cause and effect. What you plant now becomes the tree you have to live under later. An apple seed won't grow a banana tree. In this ruin, my intuition told me we'd almost planted a seed that would grow into a tree of destruction," he went on. "So I tried to dig that seed out and plant a sweet one instead." The others exchanged puzzled looks at the metaphor. Raven frowned. "Are you saying you can predict the future?" "No," Lin Yi replied. "I sense causality. The effects flow from the causes. Small changes now can stop a chain of events from building into something disastrous." He shrugged. "Don't underestimate how much trust matters. When you increase trust among people, you change the direction of those seeds. Before a tree grows tall, the seed is tiny and fragile. A little care or a little neglect can change everything." Weiss still looked slightly bewildered. "So, because we've started trusting each other more, the bad feeling vanished?" Lin Yi nodded. "Exactly." Weiss rolled her eyes and then, as if remembering a simpler way to put it, said, "All right, let me make it plain. Imagine A likes B and B likes A, but A is hiding secrets. B suspects but doesn't ask. A doesn't want B to know. Those hidden things and guesses pile up until B thinks A will never tell the truth and might betray them. They fight. B runs out crying, gets hit by a truck, and dies. A is left devastated, thinking if only they hadn't kept secrets." She looked at them all. "Now do you understand?" There was a beat of silence, then a chorus of exasperated laughter. "Oh, if you'd said that earlier, we would have all understood," someone cried. Lin Yi could only stare, speechless, as Weiss smiled triumphantly. 44. How did this turn me into Mario? Lin Yi and his companions pressed deeper into the temple, increasingly surprised. From the outside, it had looked small, but inside the space stretched on and on. They wondered if someone had used space magic or inscriptions to expand it. Otherwise, it made no sense that a ruined temple, barely the size of a museum, would still have no end in sight after 20 minutes of walking. It couldn't be a ghost wall, could it? Hiss. Now I get why this ruin felt so huge. We've been walking in circles inside a mirror. Lin Yi froze as the realization hit. What? His outburst left the girls baffled. They'd assumed the temple was just enormous. Of course it would take a while to reach the end. Weiss was the first to put it together. Think about it. Mirror, the mirror world, and that silent white giant we saw earlier. Why was he silent? Because he was in the mirror, in this mirror temple. We're inside the same thing, Raven added. We're trapped in it, which is why it seems endless even though we're actually looping. Oh, the others said, suddenly understanding. So what do we do? How do we break the mirror trapping us here? Weiss asked, gesturing. Do you remember where that silent white giant came out from? Raven prompted. The wall, someone answered. Exactly. The answer was staring us in the face all along, but we've been circling here for 20 minutes. Seriously, that makes no sense. Lin Yi scratched his head sheepishly. Spending all his time at home gaming had dulled his detection skills. No wonder the solution hadn't occurred to him sooner. Still, he couldn't resist a little praise. Hey, solving an invisible puzzle like that in 20 minutes is pretty impressive. Honestly, if it were me, I'd probably be stuck here for another 2 hours, Gwen said with a laugh. Gwen, don't sell yourself short, Raven scoffed. You're smarter than you think. Lin Yi stepped over to the wall on the left to check his hunch. He pressed his palm to the surface. It looked like stone, but the feel was off. It was trying to mimic rough stone, but it was unmistakably a mirror. He smirked, stepped back, and charged in with a kick. The surface was slick and elastic. The mirror rippled like a pond and bounced him back with a painful recoil. He flew backward and nearly hit the opposite wall. Tsk, didn't hit it hard enough. Go full force. Don't hold back. That mirror was meant to trap us until we died, Lin Yi said, turning to the strongest presence in the group. Gwen smiled and stepped forward. Got it. She took a breath, charged, and punched. Boom. The impact hit like a 100-ton truck. The left mirror wall exploded into shards under her strength. Ugh, super strength. I don't want to see what happens if you get mad at me, Lin Yi said, grinning. Gwen laughed. Then don't make me mad. I'll be good. With the mirror broken, the first trial of the temple was passed. Beyond it, a new chamber opened, a true platformer. Floating stone blocks, spike pits, arrow-shooting walls, weird mechanisms, and some white spirit creatures that were now decidedly vocal. The whole design looked ripped from a game. Shh, looks like I'm playing Silk Song, Lin Yi muttered. We can either jump through it or turn back, Weiss said. Lin Yi shrugged. I'll go scout ahead, follow my safe path. Raven, however, used magic to hover and drifted forward. This will save time. It shouldn't be too difficult. Be careful, though. There are lots of traps, Lin Yi warned. Gwen, hands in her pockets, shot out a web and swung across, clearing a path. I didn't expect everyone to have a trick up their sleeve. I won't be left behind. Weiss flicked her rapier and traced an inscription array. A white path of formations floated in the air, letting her stride across with ease. Lin Yi looked at them, utterly defeated. Of all of them, he had the worst mobility. Raven flew. Weiss walked on a magical path. Gwen swung on a web. He was stuck with the manual jumping. He told himself it was pride. Asking for help would be an affront to his title as the king of skill. If I have to jump, I'll jump. It's not like I haven't done it before. So he started the high difficulty platforming. Imagine 3 girls, one hovering, one walking on a floating glyph, one swinging comfortably, watching him frantically dodge mechanisms, avoid spikes, find tiny footholds, and pull off risky jumps. Step by step, relying on agility and a few spectacular moves, Lin Yi avoided every danger and finally reached the high platform. By then, Raven, Weiss, and Gwen were already waiting, some even higher up. Gwen dangled upside down from a web and cheered. Go, Jack, I know you can do it. Weiss relaxed on her circular formation and floated serenely. Raven hummed a tune as she hovered, an upbeat, heroic melody. Dun 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 dun! Lin Yi wiped sweat from his brow and stared. Great, he just turned into Mario. Lin Yi even wondered if the people who built this temple had anything wrong with them. They could put defenses where they were needed, but instead, they filled it with traps and platforming sections just to torment ordinary people like him. Ha! Ha! He finally staggered to the end of the platform and stared at the crystal switch before him, breath heaving. Why couldn't it just be harder? Why not fill the platform with mobs so he could use skills to restore stamina instead of arriving at the end utterly exhausted? It was the worst kind of design, neither hard nor easy, just annoyingly awkward. Congratulations! The 3 girls who had been watching broke into applause, genuinely pleased to have seen a decent platforming show. Next time, can you carry me? Lin Yi joked. We didn't need any help, Weiss said, confused. You passed it pretty easily. Seriously? Lin Yi teased. All right, I'm kidding. We just wanted to see you show off. Weiss rolled her eyes. Hurry and open the mechanism. Who knows what else is waiting in this cursed place? Lin Yi had Weiss activate the inscription beneath her feet to trigger the crystal. The stone pillar glowed, inscription power flooded the area, and the entire platforming space began to flip, slowly turning the whole room upside down. What the? Lin Yi stared, incredulous. Of course it would do that. When was the system ever going to give him a flying skill? He was saved only because Raven used magic to make him float. As usual, making others float was no trouble for Raven. She just didn't want to bother. So what now? We flipped it, and now we have to do it again upside down. Lin Yi's brain started working. If you rotate a mirror, nothing changes unless the thing in front of the mirror turns too. The space was the same, only inverted, so flipping it again from the inverted position should restore the original orientation and maybe reveal something new. He looked up at the crystal high above and called, Weiss, activate the switch again. Weiss, starting to float toward the high crystal, paused. Wait, where are you going? Not up there. Activate the switch here, the one we just used. But we already activated that one. Shouldn't we go to the next one? Trust me. Weiss sighed and obeyed. She triggered the same crystal again, and the room flipped back. As it returned to its original state, A hidden passage opened in one of the walls. Wow, Weiss said, suddenly understanding. It's a cheap little trap. If we'd gone to trigger the other switch, we would have just kept flipping the room back and forth. An exit would never appear. Amazing deduction, Gwen teased. Just basic logic, Lin Yi said modestly. The builder was clever, but lazy. Without Lin Yi's quick thinking, they might easily have been stuck here for a very long time, even turned away from exploring. Thanks to him, they moved on to the third stage, the mob room. I knew it. With a ruin like this, of course there'd be mobs guarding the next area, Lin Yi said, relieved as he looked at the piles of white spirit monsters filling the new space. Weiss and the others took battle stances. Lin Yi, finally in his element, relaxed. Compared to annoying platforming and puzzles, combat felt simple and natural, like coming home. He dodged a white spirit's ambush with a grin and swept his demonic black sword in a blur, cleaving through 5 or 6 spirits in a couple of slashes. And then he noticed something important. The black sword could absorb mobs made of inscription power. It wasn't just a weapon that fed on magic and life force. This blade could even take in inscription power itself. That hinted at a deeper background for the sword. Lin Yi filed the detail away as he kept moving, dancing through attacks and tearing the spirits down with practiced ease. Weiss and the others were fierce too, but more measured. As they fought, Lin Yi watched Weiss closely. Her footwork and swordplay were excellent. Her professional training made her far more refined than Gwen, who relied on reflexes and speed. Weiss's use of inscription power was precise. She raised inscription shields to defend, enchanted her rapier to boost strikes, and fired inscription energy bullets for quick-ranged bursts. She could cast fire and ice at a distance, send tracking inscription blades, freeze or trap foes with earth spells, and even lock enemies mid-air with arrays. In short, she covered tanking, melee, ranged, and crowd control, an entire toolkit rolled into one. Lin Yi applauded her performance. You're a walking inscription machine. If your stats were a little higher, you'd basically be superhero T0. Raven had powerful ranged magic, but was weaker in close quarters. Gwen excelled in melee and could shoot webs, but her ranged output was limited. Weiss, however, could do nearly everything. Lin Yi couldn't help admiring how overpowered that was. Under their pressure, the white spirits were wiped out quickly. Weiss stood with her hands on her hips, smiling. Piece of cake, just look who's here. Super Sorceress Raven, Super Spider Gwen, plus super overpowered Weiss. Why does my title sound weird? Weiss muttered. Because you're the strongest, Lin Yi said with a smug grin. Weiss's intuition flashed. I don't think you mean that. Me, a cheater? Calling you a cheater? Weiss snorted. Jack, do you even remember how many monsters you killed on your own? Lin Yi blinked. How many? We only handled about 1/3 of them. The rest were all you, Weiss said, flabbergasted. Lin Yi shrugged. The demonic black sword had been urging him on. It fed on kills, and it was getting close to full. Clinging to someone this powerful definitely meant a steady stream of feasts. The blade would soon discover it was due for more than just a simple meal. 46. You can copy my handsome looks, but can you copy my talent? So what now? We've cleared the monsters, but there doesn't seem to be any other way out except backtracking. Weiss looked around, one hand on her hip, the other gesturing casually. Could this be another riddle? Gwen frowned and thought for a moment. What do you think? Little genius, isn't it time to switch on that all-knowing brain of yours? The Raven walked slowly over to Lin Yi's side. It's already working, and you don't need to frantically search for an exit. The exit will come to us. Lin Yi smiled faintly. What? No sooner had he said that than the rough stone walls around them rippled and smoothed into shining mirrors. The Raven blinked. You knew all along? She raised an eyebrow. Yes, these walls are the same kind that trapped us before. They're just disguised differently this time. Weird. How did you figure that out? Gwen asked. Pay attention to the details. Lin Yi smiled. What else can I say? White inscription energy began to flow over the mirrored surfaces, characters and pathways crawling across them like living things. The air grew heavy with power. I don't like this, Weiss murmured, edging closer to Lin Yi. There's a huge amount of energy building up in those walls. So much that even the black sword in my hand is getting excited. Lin Yi looked down. The sword trembled faintly. Does that mean bad? Gwen asked. More or less. Be ready. This will be a full-on fight. Lin Yi's voice had a low calm to it that set everyone on edge. A white crystal shot out of the mirror first. Lin Yi saw it early, but he didn't move. Weiss did. Instantly, she spun out an inscription shield. The crystal shattered against it, exploding into a fog so cold and thick they could barely see their own hands. They hadn't expected the mirrors to blind them first. Then strands of glowing spider silk flew from the mists toward the raven's back, but Lin Yi cut it mid-flight with a single stroke. That reaction speed, that foreknowledge, he seemed able to perceive threats without sight, like a living radar. Be careful, he said. We're not facing monsters right now. We're facing mirror duplicates. Duplicates? The girls echoed. This ruin hides massive inscription power, Lin Yi explained. The things coming for us are copies of us. He added with a small grin, without me, your chance of losing is 94%. The number hit them like a punch. Gwen and Weiss exchanged wide-eyed looks. 94%? Weiss exclaimed. If they're duplicates, shouldn't it be 50-50? Gwen kept scanning the fog. If it were just his duplicate, sure, but I'm afraid to say there's another factor, mine. Lin Yi only smiled and let the hint hang. Pay attention, they're moving. His eyes flashed red. He'd slipped into combat mode. Gwen's spider sense screamed before she felt anything, and a fist came from her right. She spun, backflipped, and vanished into the fog to avoid it. Weiss was hit by a series of rapier strikes, back-jumped, and then she too disappeared into the mist. Are you just going to watch them get ambushed? The Raven asked, puzzled. She'd seen Lin Yi stop a sneak attack before. She knew he could prevent it. He only replied calmly that the two girls could handle one-on-one fights. I helped you earlier because you were about to be dragged into a group attack. In one-on-one fights, with your strength, I wouldn't have worried. She relaxed and put on her battle face. I'll take the most troublesome one. You go fight your duplicate. Might be a valuable experience. Where is mine? Lin Yi asked. Over there. She pointed. 32.12 degrees northwest of where you are. Lin Yi nodded. The Raven dashed toward her mirror with a magic charge. With them occupied, Lin Yi rested the black sword on his shoulder and looked into the fog where red lights and silhouettes flickered. So you call yourself a duplicate, he murmured. I suppose I should call you my true self. The figure that stepped out was a version of Lin Yi, his face, his posture, an inscription-created echo of the life he remembered. It sneered immediately. Don't look at me like that, the duplicate spat. You tried reincarnation and failed so many times. You summoned me, your own choice. You stealing my life? That's a manipulative bitch move, isn't it? The duplicate ranted about ruined dreams, about being forced here, about vengeance. For the first time in a long while, anger flared in Lin Yi. Since you chose to shove your life onto me, he said coldly, then bear the consequences. He swung the black sword, aiming for a kill. Inside Lin Yi's head, other voices muttered, notes of pain and fury from the sword itself. The duplicate screamed that no one could leave now, that the ruin's guardian would be unbeatable, that everything was the other's fault. The duplicate lunged with a cry, but Lin Yi barely reacted verbally. Is that all? He asked. You call this your strength? No wonder you kept reincarnating. Someone like you will always leech off others, the duplicate sneered. His next swing never connected. With a sharp crack, the duplicate shattered into a spray of mirror fragments at Lin Yi's feet. At that instant, Lin Yi's veins darkened with a scorching red, his eyes taking on vertical, demonic pupils. The black sword's tentacle-like edges pierced his palm, drawing blood as it drank the duplicate's burst of inscription energy. He had been ready to use Time Stop, but why use a sledgehammer to crack a nut? This thing didn't deserve that. A single precise strike did the job. The sword exulted inwardly as it absorbed the surge. It had never tasted such power. Every enemy Lin Yi had led it to fight had been a feast, but this was ecstatic, invigorating. It reveled in the power, thinking that its master truly matched it. And even as it spoke victories to itself, it didn't yet know how much greater the next thrills would be. What is a sense of security? This is a full sense of security. This is ridiculous. How did I end up being used by my parallel self? Lin Yi muttered as he slowly sheathed his black sword. The furious red veins across his skin faded, and the vertical, demonic pupils in his eyes returned to normal. If he's weaker than me, that's one thing. But didn't you pull me here because I'm supposed to be stronger than you? Humph. He chuckled. He's already having second thoughts after barely 2 days, right brain blaming left brain, saying it's my fault. Pathetic and kind of tragic. But I'm not going to cry about it. He turned to watch Weiss and the others still locked in combat with their mirror replicas. The situation really did look like a 50-50 fight. Even someone like Raven, a demonic talent, could be perfectly copied by the power of the inscriptions. If she didn't break her limits and unleash a massive amount of magic, she wouldn't be able to secure an overwhelming victory. Those mirror copies didn't tire. They fought with machine-like precision. If the battles dragged on, the replicas could very well gain the upper hand. All the more reason for these matches to be excellent opportunities for the three girls, Weiss, Gwen, Raven, to push themselves and grow. And with Lin Yi standing by as the final line of defense, they could afford to go all out. The girls understood that instinctively. They glanced at him from time to time, checking that he had truly finished his own duel and was indeed that absurdly powerful super war god everyone whispered about. Seeing him smile and watch from the sidelines stoked their competitive fires even more. Their attacks became fiercer, their movements quicker. Lin Yi enjoyed the sight. Who wouldn't like watching skilled warriors at their best? But he didn't just watch for long. With his combat experience, he saw a way to make each of them break their mirror opponents entirely. Weiss, flexibility's good, but if your footwork gets rushed and unsteady, you become easy to hit, he called out. Weiss, in the middle of a tug-of-war with her replica, blinked at him in confusion. She kept retreating to avoid the replica's thrusts, and sure enough, as Lin Yi warned, her footwork started to loosen. She grew anxious and began dodging hurriedly without really seeing the enemy's next move. Predictable panic. The replica needed only a simple, straight attack to punish her lapse. Weiss misstepped. Rather than evading, she moved toward the strike. The blade slipped past her guard and almost drove through her head. Lin Yi reacted in an instant. He threw the black sword, deflecting the replica's thrust. The blade's arc saved Weiss from being impaled. The shock of having narrowly escaped a fatal wound flooded Weiss. Her hands and knees trembled. She was still young and had never faced a true life-or-death moment. Such a reaction was natural. Relax, don't be afraid. No matter what happens, I'm here, Lin Yi said, stepping in. His presence, calm, unshakable, wrapped around her like a shield. Weiss clung to that sense of security. Her panic ebbed, her trembling stopped, and she settled into focus. With Lin Yi just being there, she could breathe. She slowed, watched the replica's rhythm, and let her mind sink with the fight. No more wasted movements, only clean, precise actions. She planted her feet, set her rapier, turned her body slightly to the side with her left hand behind her back, and fixed her gaze on the mirror enemy. The replica rushed with full power, hurling a swift strike at her head, but Weiss had already read every twitch and telegraph. She used the rapier to deflect, flowed like water, and slipped through the opening to pierce the replica's head. One perfect strike and the copy shattered. That was the difference between being a formula and being a master. The mirror could mimic moves, but it had no heart, no adaptability. Once Weiss entered that deep, calm flow, the copy's scripted responses were transparent. She finished the fight with a long, exhilarated breath. I won! Ha ha! I won! Weiss cried, rushing straight for Lin Yi and flinging herself into his arms. Her shout split the focus of the other two. Raven's magic faltered. Gwen froze for a fraction too long. A magical bomb began to form above Raven's shield, and Gwen's replica was already winding up a brutal head kick. Lin Yi didn't hesitate. He snapped time shut for a heartbeat. In that stillness, he freed himself from Weiss, infused the black sword with intent, slammed Gwen's replica to the ground, and threw the sword with surgical precision through the energy sphere about to smash Raven's barrier. Everything was done in the blink of an instant. He had enough time to close the distance again, sheath the blade, and let time resume. When the world moved again, Weiss was still hugging him, oblivious. Lin Yi's veins were dimming, his eyes returning to normal. Raven and Gwen stared dumbfounded at their extinguished attacks and their toppled mirror opponents. If not for Lin Yi, both would likely have been badly hurt, maybe worse. The black sword's numerical boost had shown itself again. The speed, the force, the way he could bend the flow of battle, an abnormal advantage. With his Sword Saint mode and the sword's power combined, he could surpass even the demonic swordsman he had fought before. At the present moment, he was untouchable. That didn't mean he forgave Weiss for her careless shout. He gave her a sharp flick to the forehead. Ow! Hey, what was that for? Weiss clasped at her head in surprise. You screamed like a banshee and nearly got Raven and Gwen killed, Lin Yi scolded. Do you realize that? Weiss flushed, guilt instantly flooding her features. She looked over at Raven and Gwen, relief washing over her when she saw they were unharmed. I'm sorry? She whispered, taking her hands and placing them demurely at her sides like a chastised kitten. This isn't a small thing. There will be consequences, Lin Yi said, though his tone softened, but we'll deal with that after this is over. Okay, Weiss murmured, tiny and repentant, not daring to move far from his side. Lin Yi could only sigh inwardly at the sight, a little girl, guilty and earnest, then turn his attention back to the ongoing battles. 48. Iron Man Duel Arena is here. Even though Lin Yi had covered up their fatal mistake, Gwen and Raven were still on the verge of breaking down. The opponents they faced were perfect copies of themselves, same powers, same instincts, and worse, these versions were intent on killing. Both Gwen and Raven knew just how terrifying a mirror image like that could be. Fear made them obsessively defensive, constantly pulling back and avoiding powerful strikes instead of looking for openings to counter. It was textbook inexperience. If they could fight like Lin Yi, cast aside fear, pain, even survival instinct in the heat of battle and only keep the will to win, these clones would have fallen in moments. So the problem was mostly mental. Even Weiss had noticed. She wanted to help Raven and Gwen, but she was afraid that speaking up would distract them again, like it had before, and get them killed. She watched in tense silence. Lin Yi didn't want to say anything either. Gwen and Raven were fragile now. Any unnecessary motion or stray comment might throw them off. He could intervene directly and end the fight, but that wouldn't help them grow. Letting them rely on themselves, gain confidence, and stabilize their mindset was more important. As the duel dragged on, sweat dripped down both girls' faces. Their stamina was draining, while the clones' attacks stayed relentless. The enemy hadn't gotten stronger. Gwen and Raven had gotten weaker. Every human tires unless they have a bug-level endurance skill like Lin Yi. Still, time had its benefits. The two gradually found ways to cope. Their minds stopped being taught with panic. At that point, Lin Yi finally spoke up. Gwen, your spider sense is useful, right? Think back to how it warned you before, the feeling you got when you punched that sword-wielding demon earlier. Gwen's eyes snapped. Lin Yi's reminder sank in and began to work. Trust that feeling. Seek it confidently. Don't be scared. You won't be in danger with me here. She moved faster. Gwen knew why her clone had dropped earlier. Jack, Lin Yi, was here. She didn't have to be paralyzed with fear. Okay. She backflipped to create some space, dropped into the classic Spider-Man one-handed crouch, and reached inward for that premonition, the tingle that foretold danger. Lin Yi knew that with spider sense, the path to reaction-based mastery, something like Ultra Instinct, was entirely possible for Gwen. A Spider-Man didn't need decades of combat experience if they could perfectly control and utilize that sense. If Spider People spent as much time cultivating their awareness as they did fighting crime, the strongest Spider-Man might be born. Super Saiyan Spider-Man, he joked inly, might even trade blows with a Vegeta. For now, Gwen simply focused on precision. No, that's not it. Sharper, quicker, she murmured to herself. She fell into the flow. Her evasions became cleaner, more efficient. Perception slowed. Everything sharpened. She waited for the faint onset of that sense. There, she felt it, the tiny premonition, and reacted before her brain could argue. As the clone's punch blurred toward the right side of her head, Gwen slipped to the side and launched an uppercut. Dong. The fist smashed straight through the clone's skull. It wasn't a considered decision so much as an instinctive act driven by spider sense. Evade, then commit. Like when she'd punched that flying demon before, Gwen had just brushed the edge of an ultra-instinct-like state. The clone was down, one clean strike, and only Raven remained. Lin Yi smiled, ready to guide Raven toward a breakthrough. But his help wasn't needed. Raven simply amplified her mana and threw herself into raw force. Heaven and earth, all things, hear my command. 3 detonations ripped through the arena in rapid succession. She obliterated her clone with a merciless barrage of fire magic. Lin Yi blinked. Weiss had learned battlefield techniques. Gwen had found an auto-aim, ultra-precise cheat in her spider sense. Raven? She just flipped on a brute force mode and solved the problem by overpowering it. Of course, this was Raven. It would have been foolish not to use her stats when she had them. In this case, the boost in her attributes let her unleash full-screen devastation. Mages were often more stat than finesse. If you had the numbers, you didn't need delicate maneuvers. Raven hovered down in front of him and took a slow breath. All 3 girls had pushed past themselves. Lin Yi praised them with a genuine smile. Well done, everyone. You did great. Gwen, still a little breathless, admitted, it was terrifying. That headshot, I thought I was done for. Weiss, still shaken from her own mistake, felt guilty and hurried to apologize. I almost put you both in danger. I'm really sorry. It's fine, Raven said, calm and steady. Under that pressure, anyone could lose control. Yeah, don't beat yourself up, Gwen added. They were good sisters. One apology swept a lot away. Even so, Weiss looked miserable at herself. Raven softened. It's good you noticed and admitted it, if you really feel bad. Gwen brightened the moment in true big sister fashion. Then when this is over, you have to treat us to an amazing feast. Weiss perked up. Okay, when everything's over, I'll put together the best meal in this world. The mood lightened, laughter followed, and the tension eased. Lin Yi watched them, relieved to see humor back in the air. But the leader in him pushed aside the sweetness. I don't want to drag down the mood, he said, but I need to warn you, things might get much harder from here. Huh? They all looked at him. It's possible the final enemy we have to face is extremely powerful, maybe terrifying. Even if the monster they'd fought in the parallel world had seemed weak, Lin Yi didn't entirely trust appearances. The final guardian of the ancient ruins might be something else entirely. The quest window had already hinted at something obscene. Quest, defeat the guardian of the ancient ruins, unfinished. Reward, mirror space domain, select an enemy unit, steal 50% of all its attributes, and pull the enemy unit into a mirror world for 1 minute. After defeating the enemy unit in the mirror world, the stolen attributes will remain for 10 minutes. Lin Yi scowled. He couldn't believe a powerful elite monster would drop a skill this perverted. 49. A sign of challenging God. Weiss, try to teleport us back to the real world. Huh? Are you sure? Weiss waved her hand, still puzzled. They had come this far. If they turned back now, wouldn't all their previous risks have been for nothing? I'm sure. We can't go back. Lin Yi smiled faintly, hands in his pockets. Huh? Weiss seemed to get what he meant. She swung her rapier, channeling inscription energy, and plunged the blade into the ground as before. This time, no inscription array manifested. How can this be? Sweat prickled on Weiss's brow. If the array wouldn't form, that meant they had been trapped in this world since the moment they entered. Without Lin Yi's safety net, they might have died here. But this was supposed to be just a moderately difficult adventure. Weiss couldn't accept it. Her sister had insisted these adventures were simple explorations, not life-threatening. You think the difficulty wasn't that great? Raven stared at her. Massive monsters, trap puzzles, and a mirror doppelganger that nearly killed us. How is that not difficult? Weiss fell silent. My sister lied to me? Not necessarily, Lin Yi said. Maybe she didn't know. Maybe her experience wasn't the same as ours. You mean? Weiss's eyes widened. Exactly. It's possible the ruins we found in this mirror world aren't the same ruins your sister explored. The 3 girls exchanged looks. So there isn't just one ruin here? Gwen nodded. I thought it was odd. If exploring the ruins means risking drowning, who would let the family's most important child go on a dangerous trip like that? Who would be that cruel? It doesn't make sense, Raven added. The pieces began to fit. Lin Yi paced them through the most reasonable explanation. When Weiss's sister and her group explored before, they must have found a different ruin, one above the water, safer and easier to survey. They'd never encountered the submerged, deadly ruin that the 4 of them had stumbled into now. Otherwise, if her group had seen this place and knew how dangerous it was, they wouldn't have left you in the dark, Lin Yi said. Combining what we've experienced, the most likely conclusion is that our luck is just terrible. We wandered into the mirror ruins, the most difficult dungeon in this mirror world. Hearing that, the girls couldn't help but believe him. Weiss sank to her knees. Everything around them had surpassed her capabilities. So what do we do now? Gwen and Raven looked at Lin Yi like he was the answer to everything, eager for him to pull a plan out of thin air. Lin Yi grinned confidently. For now, since we can't go back, our only choice is to keep moving forward. No retreat, so we clear every obstacle in front of us. That's what we have to do, he added. Don't worry, I'll get everyone out of here in one piece. After all, I haven't had nearly enough of your pretty faces and charming company. The girls groaned and rolled their eyes, but they couldn't help smiling despite themselves. Lin Yi's shamelessness always had a way of lightening the mood. Humph, you still owe me 2 kisses, and you're already so solemn, Weiss snapped as she stood, mock scowling. That's unacceptable. Raven chimed in, but her tone was affectionate. Lin Yi shook his head, finding their dramatics hard to resist. He was genuinely relieved to see them face the danger with renewed determination. Then let's go. As they moved, the space shifted. A circular platform materialized and hovered in the center. Lin Yi stepped onto it without hesitation. Weiss and the others followed. The platform activated and began to descend, carrying them to a new area, a ruined garden overflowing with plant life. The chamber was large, 2 or 3 football fields in Lin Yi's estimate, filled with flowers and greenery on the ground and climbing the walls. Even the ceiling bore verdant growth. In the center stood a thick, ancient tree, and beneath its branches lay a woman, eyes closed, as if asleep. This is unbelievable, Weiss whispered. It was almost impossible to imagine such a lush garden hidden under an underwater ruin. Lin Yi, however, frowned. His 6th sense warned him the real danger was closing in. When the platform set them down, they approached the tree and the sleeping figure. Is she alive? Weiss asked. No, Lin Yi said. It's an illusion, one reflected by the mirror of illusion. Gwen blinked. But she looks so real. Her hands, she seems to be holding something. Raven's brow tightened at the detail. She does, but there's nothing in her hands now. Maybe someone took it already, Weiss speculated. Not necessarily, Lin Yi said, scanning the surroundings and piecing things together. When he felt his theory forming, he turned to Weiss. Use the inscription array to try teleporting us back, one more time. Huh? We tried and it didn't work before. Trust me, it will work this time. Weiss hesitated, then nodded. Lin Yi had a habit of seeing through situations. She had come to trust him. You're right. I can always trust him, she thought, steeling herself. The real challenge was about to begin. 50. God? Just pray. The space folded back. The illusion collapsed, and the beautiful garden vanished, replaced by a withered wasteland. Green vines clung stubbornly to crumbling walls, nourished by seawater. When Lin Yi and the others looked back, the thick tree was gone, and the woman who had been sleeping beneath it had become a broken stone statue with one arm missing. Floating above the statue's palm was a scroll of inscriptions, glowing with a pure white light, unscathed by time despite ages of decay. This was the prize they had come for, a scroll capable of altering the future of this world. I didn't expect the place to actually look like this, Gwen murmured, disbelief in her voice. They had all watched the garden shift and rot away, an unsettling sight. For Lin Yi, however, these kinds of shocks were becoming common. With him in this world, peril and responsibility had a way of turning the extraordinary into routine. Weiss stared at the floating scroll, her breath catching. The moment she saw it, something in her body pulled, her bloodline resonated. An irresistible urge to touch the scroll of inscriptions overcame her. Lin Yi, she called, voice strained. I don't know why, but I have to touch it. She was trembling, barely able to control her limbs. Lin Yi stepped forward calmly. Do it, he said. It's all right. With me here, there's nothing to fear. He knew what the pull meant. The Inscription clan's destiny, to inherit and advance the craft, ran in her blood. It was not something to be fought. With his permission, Weiss set aside her doubts and, accompanied by Lin Yi and the others, approached the scroll. She reached out and touched it. For a moment, space quivered. Like a drop falling into an ocean, a ripple ran through the air. The ruins blurred and then erased themselves. Lin Yi and the others vanished from the temple and reappeared at the boundary between sky and sky realm. Lin Yi drew his black sword at once. The real threat, the true boss, was about to reveal itself. They had barely had time to register, they were back. Then the mirror-like surface beneath their feet warped, and the white spirit giant that had greeted them at the temple's entrance rose again, massive, armor forming across its body, and a great sword materializing in its hands. Whatever this thing was, it was a nightmare. Weiss, Gwen, and Raven snapped into fighting stance. Every muscle tensed, they were ready to unleash everything they had. The black sword in Lin Yi's hand quivered as the giant straightened. The weapon seemed to recoil. This presence was on an entirely different scale. The sword, if it could be said to feel fear, trembled and wanted to shrink away. Lin Yi gripped it tighter and forced it open, driving his will and blood into it. He poured in his own fighting spirit, hot, fierce, and unyielding. The sword drank it in, and as Lin Yi's blood touched the blade, the trembling ceased. His courage, his hatred for gods, and his determination to strike them down washed through the weapon. "Do you understand now?" Lin Yi shouted, voice cold and hard. "So-called gods are nothing but prey. Put away that shameful fear. Taste what it means to be a god." The black sword answered like a thing unleashed. It drank Lin Yi's life and in turn poured its demonic power into him. Weiss, Gwen, and Raven watched in stunned silence as Lin Yi's body flooded with power. Flesh and bone reshaped, his skin darkened into a hard black and red shell. Scales sprouted, vertical pupils cut through his eyes, fangs and talons emerged. He stood before the white spirit giant like a knight reborn in nightmare. He felt nothing in his chest but a clinical calm, an observer measuring his foe. Then he moved. "So he's a demon?" Weiss breathed. "No," Raven said quickly, shaking her head. "Not a demon in the true sense. He was mortal. He's just taken on demonic power." Gwen's eyes were wide. "Because of his sword?" Raven nodded. "Lin Yi's black sword is a demon spirit blade. It can grant incredible power to whoever wields it, but it consumes the wielder's flesh and blood over time. Eventually, nothing is left." Weiss and Gwen paled. The realization hit hard. Lin Yi had willingly activated the sword, fully knowing the cost. "He knew the price and still used it," Raven said. "That means this enemy is so dangerous, he had no choice but to do that." Anger and helplessness mingled on the girls' faces, but grief alone would not save him. "If we don't stop that thing quickly, he'll be consumed," Gwen said through clenched teeth. "We have to take it down now," Weiss agreed. "Use everything we've got." They all steeled themselves. If the demon sword demanded flesh as payment, Lin Yi's health became the least of his concerns. Once in battle, his stamina and vitality seemed to renew endlessly. He had already understood enough of the white spirit giant to know what had to be done. Lin Yi struck with blinding speed, aiming at the giant's glowing white weak point on its waist. "God, fight! God, fight!" The white spirit giant unleashed a devastating shockwave that rippled outward in every direction, filling the entire area and leaving no escape. There was nowhere for Lin Yi to maneuver. Faced with that attack, his only choice was to resist with everything he had. The shockwave alone tore Lin Yi's body open in his demon form, flesh and blood splattered, bone exposed. The black sword in his hand developed several deep cracks and threatened to fall to pieces. If Lin Yi hadn't thrown his body into the impact and taken the brunt of the blast to create an opening, Weiss and the others behind him, even if they'd managed to raise defensive shields in time, would have had no way to survive. This was the strength of a god-tier enemy. Even with Lin Yi absorbing most of the damage, Raven and the others were struggling to keep the residual force at bay. But the stronger the enemy, the more Lin Yi's adaptive strength kicked in. As Lin Yi endured the shockwave, bloody, broken, and barely holding on, he drove whatever remained of his energy into swinging the nearly disintegrated black sword, slashing at a weak spot in the white spirit giant's waist. Snap! A clean, satisfying sound. The hit dealt 2% of the giant's total health, and in an instant, Lin Yi and the black sword were miraculously restored to full strength. The black sword had siphoned a faint power from the giant's wound through its weakness, and Lin Yi's stats began to climb rapidly. "Ha! So this is a god's power," he breathed. "It's intoxicating." The black sword carried that divine energy through Lin Yi's body. 2% per strike was no joke. one of those hits, and even a god would realize the danger. Who cared whether you were a god or a spirit? Under the passive weakness mechanic, if Lin Yi decided to kill you in 50 strikes, he would kill you in 50 strikes. The white spirit giant, sensing the threat, no longer stood idle. He swung his colossal sword with brutal force. Each blow was a massive area of effect strike, and the blade radiated terrifying sword chi that lashed out in every direction the sword pointed. After seeing those two kinds of attacks, Raven and the others understood there was no way they could intervene. The residual shockwaves alone could kill them 100 times over. Now, simply not getting in Lin Yi's way was an achievement. They had expected the enemy to be strong, but not this overwhelmingly powerful. If that monster had manifested in the real world, humanity would be doomed. And yet, could Lin Yi, a mere human in a demon form wielding a single black sword, really challenge such an existence? A god who could level cities and split mountains with one stroke? Raven and the others watched the fight between man and god and felt a conflicted mix of awe and terror. Lin Yi moved through the white spirit giant's attacks by predicting their arcs and reacting with split-second timing. But he didn't only dodge, he deliberately guided the giant's swings so the destructive residual shockwaves wouldn't sweep toward Weiss and the others. To do that, he had to absorb several seemingly fatal hits to keep the shockwaves contained. There was no room for error. If he failed to strike the weak points immediately after being hit, everything would be over. He pulled it off. That was the terrifying thing about Lin Yi. He let the black sword ravenously devour the god's power and force that energy into his own body, risking his organs tearing apart under the influx. Even if his body threatened to explode from the divine force at any moment, he never hesitated. Slash, absorb. Every time he crushed himself to the edge of collapse, he suppressed the self-destruction with sheer will, and the system's bug-level restoration skill would patch him back together. Destroy, break through. Over and over, Lin Yi grew stronger as the black sword devoured divine power through the weak points he struck. It all came down to whether he could be flawless, whether a mortal body could contain the swelling godly energy. "Yah!" he screamed, a raw war cry of reckless defiance. His sword met the white spirit giant's blade in a titanic clash. At that instant, the body covered in spreading white cracks froze as if time itself had stopped for a second. With that split-second pause, Lin Yi slipped past the greatsword and unleashed a full-power slash aimed at the brilliantly white weak point on the giant's neck. Snap. Another 2% ripped away. Lin Yi, who had been on the verge of being torn apart by divine power, not only pinned that energy under the system's restorative bug, but also saw the almost broken black sword healed back to its original state. This was the mechanism, an exploit-level interaction. A god could be a god, but if Lin Yi found the rhythm and method, even the mightiest deity could be felled. After that strike, the white spirit giant's health had fallen past half. He staggered back, plunged his greatsword into the ground, and dropped to one knee, panting. It seemed the battle might be ending with Lin Yi's victory. But it was not that simple. Under Lin Yi's stunned gaze, the white spirit giant began to gather an even more intense power. Its heavy armor cracked and fell away, revealing the true form beneath, a humanoid figure entirely white, covered in swirling ancient inscriptions. Where the armor had suppressed it, this unsealed form radiated a breathtaking, oppressive divinity. An inscription avatar, no longer merely armor and weapon, but the true god of inscription itself, stood before them. The sword he'd buried in the mirror's surface lengthened and gleamed with a sacred aura. The avatar lifted it, turned slowly, and fixed its gaze on Lin Yi. Then, with a deliberate motion, it raised the inscription sword and pointed it straight at him. Mirror, empty, domain. The words cut through the air like an edict. In the eyes of Raven and the others, the huge inscription avatar and Lin Yi vanished at once. They were gone from the outer mirror world and transported to the deepest, most central place of that dimensional realm, the mirror core world. Around them, a starry void stretched on every side, countless worlds reflected and encircled within the darkness. This was a god's domain, the terminus of endless futures and timelines. The inscription avatar planted both hands on its sword and stood like a knight, the blade gleaming with sacred light. It slowly turned to face Lin Yi. Lin Yi exhaled slowly, White cracks of divine energy reappeared across his body, and the black sword in his hand thrummed with the overflowing power it had absorbed. "Come on," he said quietly. "This divine war, it's time for it to end." "Kill the god! Kill the god!" The previous skirmishes had given the deity in front of him plenty of advantages. Lin Yi knew the inscription avatar he faced now was 1,000 or 10,000 times stronger than before. Still, he had already used his challenge tickets. He had already reached the point where a single sword strike could split earth and sky. All of that was because the avatar had been playing games, suppressing its true strength. If it had shown up at full power from the start, no matter how talented Lin Yi was, he would never have had a chance. But now, let it show what it really was. He closed the distance in a flash, forcing the avatar to act. As expected, the avatar's attack began with another pressure fluctuation, only this time it was on a completely different scale. The force felt like it could shatter the planet. Under that pressure, everything about Lin Yi, except the bone of his left hand gripping the shattered black sword, vaporized. The inscription avatar assumed the fight was finished and didn't even notice the hand bones inching toward it. Slap. The avatar felt damage. Lin Yi's bones reconstituted. He revived to full strength with the black sword. He had managed to plunder a sliver of the avatar's terrifying power. That fragment was immense, enough to cleave the sun, but his body could not hold it. He had 1 second, either be torn apart by the power within him or unleash it all. He chose to unleash. He absorbed a portion first, boosting his speed and strength, then released the rest. "Aya!" he roared and poured the stolen power outward, an explosion that should have been able to obliterate the sun. The avatar didn't even bother to defend. To it, Lin Yi's attack was a mere tickle. It stared in bafflement. How could a mortal possess god-slaying power? Where had it come from? The avatar spun its sword and opened countless mirrors within the mirror heart space. From them poured a rain of stars, an endless barrage, a torrent of stellar projectiles careening toward the ground. Was a mortal supposed to face such a thing? Lin Yi was lucky this hadn't happened in the real world, lucky the duel took place here. To thank the avatar for its arrogance, he decided to show it how a god could fall to a human. He moved like light, weaving through the falling stars, cutting and smashing them apart. He laughed, intoxicated. So this is what it felt like to be a god, annihilating stars with a casual flick of his blade. He taunted, dared the avatar to use everything it had. Explosion after explosion heightened the fight's intensity. Lin Yi closed in again. This time, the avatar got serious. Illusion, mirror, countless colossal inscribed avatars filled the space. Tens of thousands, hundreds of millions, perhaps even more. Lin Yi smiled, wildly exhilarated. "Za, Warudo." Time stop plus light speed. He understood what that meant. He activated the time stop, then moved at light speed inside it. What should have been a single second of frozen time became an effectively infinite window for him. Inside that sliver of stopped time, he slaughtered. Hundreds, thousands, millions of clones fell beneath his blade. No matter how many copies it made, they were lambs on a cutting board. The system-given time stop was a bug, an overriding command that, combined with light speed, stretched perceived time to near infinity. In that state, he was invincible. Even so, he couldn't kill the avatar's true body. Without the 2% true damage requirement, he could only destroy inferior clones. So he kept wearing them down, searching for a flaw. Time flowed again. The avatar watched in disbelief as its countless clones suddenly lay dead. The thing battling it could not possibly be human, it thought. The joy of battle had awakened something savage in Lin Yi. He craved more slaughter, more brutal destruction. Korn would have recognized him. The avatar realized the fight was effectively lost. It could see no path to victory when faced with this furious man. Yet it upheld its duty to the end. Even facing certain death, it fought on, and that unyielding defiance fed Lin Yi's excitement. This was a true battle. No retreat, only fight to the death. "Aya!" His eyes burned with nothing but hunger for combat and the thrill of slaying a god. He lunged, biting at the avatar with his sword. The avatar responded by transforming into tens of thousands of blades, launching an all-out onslaught. Each blade carried the power to destroy stars and erase days, but against Lin Yi's demonic momentum, they were insufficient. If Lin Yi had been conscious of his parallel world counterpart's thoughts, he might have understood why that other hated him, why he refused to believe Lin Yi could win. To an ordinary mind, that disbelief was reasonable. There must be an upper limit, they said. But what if Lin Yi had no upper limit? 53. Such a weak god. Thousands of blades, all sheared aside in a single stroke. Lin Yi surged through the ravenous tide of metal, his body constantly shedding fragments, as if it might disintegrate at any moment. His black sword sang under the strain, seeming on the verge of snapping. Yet each time he staggered back up, torn, ragged, but still standing. And at any moment it might explode with savage power. He raced through the blade tsunami, sparks flying as his sword carved forward. Relentless, single-minded, he cut a path straight for the inscription avatar. That stubborn, obsessive will made even the avatar frown. "What is it that keeps you going?" it asked. "And what is it that lets you gain such strength?" Lin Yi answered with his own grim intent. The inscription avatar raised its right hand slowly, clenched it, and pulled back. The thousands of blades surrounding Lin Yi tightened, trying to compress and trap him instantly. But, too slow, Lin Yi had already burst out of the blade torrent and lunged at the avatar with a dark laugh. The avatar tried to unleash a devastating inscription attack, only to be stopped. Time stop, magic sword, holy sword rush, yi-ya, all the skills stacked together. After a 0.99-second charge, Lin Yi unleashed his strongest strike into the frozen avatar. The blow struck a weak point and dealt a shocking 4% of the avatar's total health. The avatar's magic resistance was absurdly high. Under normal conditions, the weak point bonus would have done barely another 2 cents. But in Lin Yi's frenzied, demonic state, he didn't care for numbers. There was only one thought: bite and bite until the god collapsed. He sent the avatar flying and pursued without hesitation. The avatar had to deploy an inscription holy shield to keep Lin Yi at bay. Momentum shifted. Once the god chose defense over offense, it sealed its fate. All further counterattacks were only struggles for survival. Even in his madness, Lin Yi's body and mind reacted with uncanny clarity. Movements happened without thought. Dodge, anticipate, strike. The avatar countered with a furious sword barrage, each slash capable of shredding stars. Yet to Lin Yi they felt like the tantrum of a child. He evaded the deadliest blows, swung his blade, and negated the aftershocks. Like a fractured skeleton, he struck at the avatar's weak points again. Snap, absorb, recover, break through. The black sword bit into the avatar's inscription divine power and ripped it free. The stolen power flowed into Lin Yi, and he absorbed it past his limits. Pain and death meant nothing, only the hunger for dominion and the slaughter of gods. He swallowed that 1% of divine power and locked it inside his body. How could a mere mortal flesh and blood do that? The answer was soul and will. He had taken 1, next would be 2%, then 4. The avatar knew it was failing. Man versus God, and this time the god was losing. Yet it had one plea left, whispered as it gathered its final strength. Can such an existence still be called human? Come on, full power, Lin Yi roared inwardly. Unleash everything you have, destroy the world if you must. He no longer cared for life, beliefs, memories, or loved ones. All that remained in him was the desire to destroy fallen gods and a collapsing world. He reveled in that abandonment. He had never been so unbound, so delighted in his wild instincts. This was his chance, to slay a god and lay waste. Let the gods fall be a carnival of ruin. Unleash everything. The inscription avatar watched the being that had become a walking catastrophe and understood what it faced, a monster in human skin. It chose one final gambit, one last ultimate move: mirror annihilation. The avatar would pay with its mirror heart space, its very consciousness, and its eternal slumber. Here and now, it would eradicate Lin Yi. Behind the avatar, thousands of inscription formations flared up. White cracks spidered across its body, mirroring the same fractures Lin Yi bore, a sign of power too vast even for itself to contain. It was prepared to obliterate the world to end this threat. Lin Yi smiled, a cold, wicked curl. Heh, you've been tricked. The avatar's eyes widened, sensing danger, but it was already too late. Time, stop. With that soft command, Lin Yi began his final judgment. Ordinarily, even with the stolen fragment of divine power, killing such a god would have taken huge effort. But the avatar had left itself in a fragile, exposed state to execute its annihilation. That recklessness made it vulnerable to a swift finish. Within the frozen span, Lin Yi unleashed 1 billion slashes per second, pouring every ounce of strength into reducing the avatar to molecules. He had seized the precise moment during the avatar's spellcasting, when both its resistances were at their lowest, and cut it down without mercy. When the onslaught ended, Lin Yi drifted to the center of the mirror heart space, sheathed his black sword, and lightly smoothed his hair back, as if preening. "Game over," he said with a smile. The time stop ended. The avatar, shredded through and through, collapsed into glittering specks of inscription stardust that floated through the mirror heart space. The battle was over. Lin Yi had won decisively. Even the avatar knew it had no path to victory. If it self-destructed to finish him, time stop would cut it down instantly. If it tried to prolong the fight, Lin Yi would continue to exploit its passive weakness and eventually tear it apart. Either way, its fate was sealed. Another enemy fell, powerful in offense and defense, but utterly lacking recovery. The arrogance of godlike stats, high enough to blind them to the single crucial trait they lacked. If the avatar had had regenerative ability, the fight would have been far harder. Even then, Lin Yi could have kept stealing inscription divine power until he could fell the god with a single strike. It would only take longer. System, quest completed. Defeat the ancient ruins guardian. Completed. Reward issued. Mirror space domain. Select one enemy unit, steal 50% of all its attributes, and pull the enemy unit into the mirror world for 1 minute. After defeating the enemy unit in the mirror world, you will retain the stolen attributes for 10 minutes. System. Quest completed. Defeat the mirror master. Completed. Reward issued. Mirror combat style. All skills will adapt to the mirror combat style template. After entering this style, you will be able to copy one of the enemy's abilities. Lin Yi stared at the notifications. 2 bosses? And copying an enemy's ability? He just stood there, dumbfounded. Just stay dead. Don't jump out again. Just stay dead. Don't jump out again. Copy one of an enemy's skills? Okay, Lin Yi thought, but could it be used on multiple enemies in one battle or only one? If it worked on many, that would be ridiculous. Copy the strongest skill from each enemy, pull the one with the highest stats into the mirror heart space, and steal half his attributes. Who could possibly beat that? Utter invincibility. Well, Lin Yi was already pretty invincible, but with those skills he'd be unstoppable, a truly invincible young hero. You really are unreasonable," a voice beside him said. Lin Yi turned, puzzled. The voice belonged to the very person who'd cost him the Street Fighter Championship, the other Lin Yi from that world, the version that had died. "Why are you back here? If you're dead, stay dead. Can't you die completely?" Lin Yi snapped. "Why do you keep popping up like this? If you don't stop, I'll have to find a way to deal with you." Lin Yi had no patience for this parallel counterpart. The man was weak, a meddler who ruined other people's lives and never apologized afterward, always blaming the victims. What a piece of work. "Ugh, I want to kill you too, but who told you to come to this place?" "This place? What are you talking about?" the other protested. He showed no remorse. That sparked Lin Yi's temper. "You couldn't let someone like this off." "I said, why did you have to come here? Why can't I come here?" Lin Yi laughed bitterly. Was the guy brain dead? A god this powerful is standing right in front of you and you ask why? Are you blind? His fist flew without hesitation, aiming for the man's face, only to pass right through him. "Humph. You know I'm dead and you're still trying to hit me?" That smug look was intolerable. Lin Yi lost it. "Are you the product of a dog and a bitch's one-night stand? A monstrous brat who survived on garbage meals in a public restroom?" Let the cursing begin. Full attack power. "You," the counterpart started, but Lin Yi's insults were faster and harsher. "No wonder maggots grew up around you. After all these reincarnations, you still couldn't save your world. Someone like you, what's there to save? If you died earlier, it would have been a favor to that world." The other blinked, stunned. Lin Yi kept on, merciless. "Even dead, you can't even die cleanly, like a fat snake stuck in a toilet, too clingy to flush away. Absolutely disgusting." The other man gagged and actually vomited blood. Lin Yi pressed on like a pitiless prosecutor. "I can forgive your lack of manners. Your background probably doomed you to be an abnormal carbon-based life form. But from now on, when you ask someone for help, especially when you force them to help, remember this: respect comes first." Whether my choice is right or wrong, you owe me praise for making it. I have to take care of all your messes. For that alone, worshipping me like an ancestor is the minimum respect. Understand? Those words left the counter speechless. Lin Yi shook his head and gave him one last roll of contempt. You call me the one at fault? If you weren't so useless, so mentally broken, would I have had to come here to clean up your mess? If I hadn't met Gwen, Raven, and Weiss, I'd have cursed you to death long ago. You should be grateful I'm even letting you stand here and not scattering your soul. Lin Yi's rant hit hard. The dead Lin Yi clenched his fists, humiliation making tears appear at the corners of his eyes. Disgraceful. Your weakness isn't my weakness. You encounter something and immediately think you can't win. Am I that useless? Lin Yi sighed, his vent complete, and calmed slightly. Reborn into a better life next time. At least learn some basic respect. He began to turn away, not wanting to waste more breath on the worthless echo of himself. Then the other cried out, looking genuinely hurt and confused. I didn't want this. Why is everything my fault? Why do bad things always happen to me? I tried so hard, even to the point of not caring if I died, so why is it still my fault? Hearing those whiny words ignited Lin Yi again. Humph. Now you're acting like Shinji, feeling wronged. He looked back at him, disdainful. Why did you try so hard? Why did you reincarnate countless times and still fail, while some other version of you does it perfectly on the first try? Why did you shed blood and tears and accomplish nothing? You sacrificed nothing, you experienced nothing, yet you got all this strength, this talent. What is that even based on? The counterpart began to sob and shout back. Lin Yi cut him off. Based on what? Based on you being a worthless piece of trash and me being a heaven-defying genius. Who said effort guarantees reward? Who told you suffering means you'll be happy later? Are you 3 years old? You brag about how many times you've been reborn, so tell me, how are you still weak? Even a fool would be brilliant after hundreds of millions of restarts. But you? You're more idiotic than an idiot because you just keep repeating suffering. You haven't truly tried. You wallowed in the muck waiting for a miracle. The other was speechless. Lin Yi laughed, bitter and scathing. Thanos found a way to turn the tide after 14 million tries. You, after hundreds of millions, can't even save a world. And you have the nerve to blame me. Serves you right, you died. Do you think saving a world is that simple? He hammered the point home. Tell me, what exactly would destroy a world? Tell me, and then watch me. Watch me anger you to death again, you idiot. Watch me kill the god you think is unbeatable, just like now. Isn't this what you wanted? Isn't this why you summoned me? Huh? The counterpart could only weep, unable to answer. You are a complete failure because you don't trust anyone, including yourself. The final trump card you gambled your life on, that's me. You don't even believe in it. You thought you would lose from the start, so you wouldn't admit you could win. You were terrified of losing everything, so you schemed to throw off responsibility all at once. You were too hypocritical to admit you'd abandoned hope, so you chose to summon another version of yourself from another world to save this one. You wanted to delude yourself that you hadn't actually abandoned responsibility. But the moment you gave up your life to summon me, you were undeniably garbage. Do you understand? The other couldn't respond, just sobbing. The reason you blame me is because you still wanted to be a hero in your own eyes. You wanted to see me save the world so you could tell yourself you finally did the right thing. You wanted to hand everything to me and call it a noble sacrifice. Lin Yi pointed at his chest. That was your plan, to use me as a witness to your own righteousness. But none of it was real. You made no right choices. You ran away. You gave up responsibility, life, and yourself. You're pathetic and hateful scum. So yes, this is all your fault. You can blame yourself entirely. He paused, cold and cutting. Do you still think you did something noble when you watched me slaughter that god? Did you feel vindicated? If so, don't make me laugh. You summoned me so you could test whether you could hand everything to me and then make a touching speech about mutual understanding. You wanted to be able to say you saved the world by sacrifice. Damn you. Go to hell, useless piece of trash. That final denunciation was merciless. The dead counterpart, already hollowed out by shame and Lin Yi's onslaught, crumpled. He despaired so utterly that his consciousness collapsed, and then, as Lin Yi had warned he might do earlier, the thing that had been a man dissolved into dust and scattered, his soul dispersed. Lin Yi had originally planned to let him be, let him vanish on his own, reincarnate or not, but the other had been so vile and useless that Lin Yi couldn't risk him popping up again. He watched the dust drift away and felt a strange, sour relief. 55. Pretty girl Pokemon, huh? Cursing felt good, and Lin Yi had to admit he'd padded this chapter like a pro. He mentally promised the author they'd settle the bill for all the filler later. Filler wasn't easy, it even cost him a chance to gather intel. Ah well, if you could fight your way through it, information was optional. But next time, less filler, he muttered to himself, or at least bring me a drink before you start. I get parched. Deal made. Next time the story wandered, he swore he'd have a bottle of Pulse ready. Then he used the inscription power inside him, left the now masterless mirror heart space, and returned to Weiss and the others. Of course, his clothes hadn't been super glued on. They were utterly destroyed in the fight. Lin Yi had no choice but to keep parts of himself glowing with inscription light, an awkward magic-based sensor, until he could get decent coverage. Jack, Raven, Weiss, and Gwen rushed forward when they saw him reappear. Lin Yi held up his hands. Wait, keep your distance. I'm completely naked right now. Their faces went white, and they stumbled back, creating as much space as their instincts allowed. There were 4 people here, and no privacy at all. A very different kind of awkward silence settled over the group. Raven squeezed her eyes shut for a beat, but she didn't judge. She'd seen more than this before. Gwen and Weiss hadn't, and Gwen in particular looked a little disappointed at the interruption. Raven frowned at their expressions. What are those looks for? No, nothing, the two protested instantly, perfectly in sync. They sounded like a comedy duo. Raven waved it off and changed the subject. Why do your clothes always get destroyed whenever you fight something? Gwen asked, genuinely curious. If you were blasted to nothing, how are you even alive? And where's your equipment? Raven shrugged. My power. If the opponent is strong enough, I can't die. It fixes things in weird ways. Lin Yi brushed past them to reveal a parchment that had been hovering behind him, faintly glowing, the scroll of inscriptions. Weiss, you should claim this. Weiss blinked, unbelieving. Me? Lin Yi smiled and snapped his fingers. With a soft shimmer, the scene shifted back to the ruined garden they'd fought in earlier. The fractured beauty of the place returned. The moss, the shattered columns, the faint echo of the Guardian. Everyone inhaled at once. So you can manipulate that alternate dimension now? Raven's eyes widened. Sort of, Lin Yi said. More accurately, I absorbed part of the power of that strange Guardian of the Ruins. Amazing. Gwen's voice was breathless. So you can use inscription power like me? Not exactly. I absorbed a divine power, something capable of destroying heaven and earth, Lin Yi said casually. The sentence hung in the air, and the 3 of them fell silent. What did you actually experience while you were gone? Weiss asked, voice small. A universe war is probably the best way to put it, Lin Yi said. It wasn't the sort of thing easy to explain, and his relaxed attitude only made it sound less credible. The girls exchanged looks. The scale of his claim was beyond what they could imagine, and Lin Yi's calm didn't help. All right, enough of the mystery, he said with a shrug. This scroll helps you understand the world's true nature if you can decipher it. It can give power and insight, maybe even avert certain cataclysmic events. But a lot of the details are hidden inside the scroll itself. You'll have to see for yourself. Weiss stepped forward hesitantly and touched the scroll. White light flowed over her, and faint inscription characters danced along her skin. The letters swam in patterns, wrapping around her like a second skin. Power fed into her, reshaping and evolving her. Wow, Weiss looks like she's about to mega-evolve, Gwen whispered, half joking, but unable to hide her awe. Weiss's back glittered as crystalline formations began to sprout, delicate ice-like wings that caught the light and scattered it into tiny prisms. The transformation wasn't vulgar. It was beautiful and utterly supernatural. Raven muttered, shiny ice crystal wings, of course. Lin Yi couldn't help laughing at how perfectly the moment fit Gwen's pop culture metaphor. If anyone had suggested they were on some ridiculous pretty girl Pokemon adventure, he might not have argued. The world was absurd enough for that. 3 girls, 1 scroll, and a boy who came back from a universe war with a handful of cosmic powers. Pretty girl Pokemon, obtained, he thought, grinning at the thought as Weiss's wings finished forming and the white inscriptions settled into her skin like a new set of runes. 56. A cute elf girl, huh? After fusing with the mysterious inscription power from the Scroll of Inscriptions, Weiss only grew stronger, more radiant, more beautiful. Lin Yi rubbed his chin and sighed. Heh, I didn't expect evolution to actually boost one's looks. I guess the weakest one left is me, he muttered. Gwen glanced at him, a little helpless. She'd always imagined her spider role as something heroic, but lately she felt she'd be the one hiding behind everyone else. What's there to be afraid of? This world's chaotic. There are plenty of ways to increase your combat power. As long as you get the chance, even someone handicapped could become a god. Becoming stronger is only a matter of time. Lin Yi's words calmed her. If a regular guy like him could gain inscription power in a short time, then why worry? She'd already seen one mortal become a superhero. Everyone had another shot at evolution, so she would be ready when her chance came. She nodded, determined to prepare and seize it. Weiss, meanwhile, seemed to have become a literal snow princess. The inscription power wrapped her in a magical aura. Colorful script flowed around her like an activated immortal technique, like ancient diagrams or a Tai Chi formation unfolding on their own. Lin Yi felt like he was watching a masterless cultivation skill come to life. It made him wonder if renowned sages Ji Chang, Laozi, Confucius had a hand in these inscriptions. If that were true, then whatever had driven the world to unite and forge this new system was far bigger than anyone guessed. Hey look, everyone, look at me. I can fly on my own now without any formation. Weiss cried. Just like Raven, someone called. Weiss laughed and soared up, exhilarated. Flying was intoxicating. She finally understood why Raven loved it. Wow, look, I can scatter sparkling stardust behind me like a little fairy. Sparkle, sparkle, she squealed, delighted. Gwen scowled at the spectacle. She's like a Pokemon. Do you have a Master Ball? Lin Yi played along. No, but I have something more effective than a Master Ball. Gwen teased, raising a finger. Weiss, Jack said he's almost ready to give you your reward. Really? Weiss dropped down at once, glowing with joy. Wow, you could be the greatest Pokemon trainer in the world. Am I not already? Lin Yi grinned. We got what we came for. Shouldn't we leave now? Gwen suggested. Raven agreed. She didn't want to linger in the strange garden any longer. Beautiful as it was, something about the place felt heavy, oppressive. I don't know why, but I feel really stifled here. Maybe it's because I absorbed the inscription power from that scroll. Weiss produced the scroll from her hand and frowned. No, I feel it too. Where's this oppression coming from? Gwen tapped her forehead, indecisive. I know the source, but I don't recommend going to look for it right now. Why not? Because going after it would be another long adventure. Until Weiss deciphers some of the scroll's secrets, poking around won't get us anywhere. Lin Yi pointed toward the green tree, where someone lay like Sleeping Beauty. Is it her? To be precise, it's her memories, those long, heavy memories, causing that feeling, Gwen said. Let's live a little more before we get curious about someone else's memories, Lin Yi suggested. He snapped his fingers and teleported them all back to the outer edge of the mirror world. So, call it a day or want to keep admiring the scenery? They all agreed on the former. The place was too empty and oppressive to linger. Weiss used a small formation spell to return them to the real world, and she could now choose to enter her Snow Princess state whenever she wanted. Gwen, amused, crowed, Weiss Super Evolution! Snow Princess Weiss, come out! You really think I'm the Pokemon here? Weiss said, rolling her eyes. Well, you are pretty flashy, and you're a lot like one. Gwen tilted her head. Then do you think I could beat Pikachu? Lin Yi snorted. I don't think you could beat Ash. Gwen bristled. Why not? Can you survive 100,000 volts? No. Then how could you compare yourself to Ash? She had him there. He fell silent. Weiss called them over. Come take a picture with us. They fell into easy banter and wandered toward the water as the sun began to set behind the mountains. Gwen stretched and sighed dreamily. I want to lie in the water. Me too, she added. I'd love to lie back and stare at the sky. Then go ahead, Lin Yi said, smirking. Just remember to give me your clothes afterwards. Gwen smiled and without hesitation stretched out and lay down. Maybe Raven should help you change into something new, she offered. Before Lin Yi could protest, Gwen shot a web and yanked him into the shallow water with her. He could have dodged, but he didn't bother. If he was going to get soaked, he might as well commit. "This is all salt water," he warned as they settled in. "Don't blame me if soaking in it gives you any problems. Consider yourself warned." Weiss watched them, shaking her head with an affectionate smile. Chapter 57. In real life, be your true self. Super-duper big bed. Weiss flopped onto the huge bed with a squeal, rolling and bouncing on the mattress. Lin Yi stood with one hand on his hip, watching her and shaking his head. "Why did you only book one room?" "What? You think the bed isn't big enough? This bed's more than enough for the four of us," Weiss said, patting the mattress possessively. "Humph. It's not about the size. It's just, don't you think it's weird for me, a guy, to sleep with 3 girls? Would it be?" Weiss tossed the question over to Gwen and Raven. Raven ducked the topic and walked straight into the bathroom. Gwen turned on the TV, scanning for something to watch. "Nobody else minds, right? Why are you so weird about it?" "Ha, yeah. If I mess up, don't say I didn't warn you," Lin Yi said. He'd already told them that if anything strange happened tonight, they shouldn't blame him for not giving a heads up. But Weiss and the others were clearly hoping for some kind of slip-up. Was he walking into a trap? Then again, if someone was willing to fall and someone else willing to catch, maybe that made them both complicit. "By the way, Jack, why are you so strong?" After everything that happened today, Weiss couldn't help asking. "You always call yourself a superhero, but how did you become one? What's your superpower? Why can you beat creatures hundreds of times stronger than you?" Gwen set the remote down and leaned in. "You wouldn't even understand my power if I explained it. Think of it as some high-dimensional being taking a liking to me and granting divine power. As for me, well, I became a superhero the day I fought that rhino monster," Lin Yi said, slowly lying down on the bed to explain. Weiss rested her chin on her hand. What's the difference between saying that and saying nothing?" "Of course there's a difference. At least now we know your power isn't something you were born with, didn't learn later, and wasn't from a radioactive spider bite." "Wow, you really know a lot about us," Gwen murmured. "It's not fair. You know everything about us, and we know nothing about you. Can't you tell us more? About yourself?" Weiss launched into her usual pushy routine. "I'm not saying I won't tell you. Ask whatever you want." Lin Yi propped his head up on his hands. "Then let's start basic. You're human, right?" "Of course, that's how I see myself," Gwen answered. "What do you mean, how you see yourself? Are you or aren't you?" Lin Yi pressed. Gwen blinked. Neither she nor the others expected such a simple question to open up a big reveal. "Let me ask you this, Gwen. After you were bitten by the spider, did you still consider yourself human?" "Of course I am. I just got stronger than ordinary people. Essentially, I'm still human, no doubt about it." Gwen was decisive, clear about her identity. "Humph. Then I'm human too, except I'm not the product of my parents' love." "What? I am a clone." "Clone." Gwen and Weiss froze. Raven, mid-shower, immediately stopped and teleported from the bathroom back at high speed, magic shimmering around her. "What do you mean? You're not human, you're a clone?" Gwen blurted. Lin Yi couldn't help a wry smile. "One second you think inhuman is human, the next you decide clones aren't human." "Sorry, it's just, this is so shocking. How can you be a clone?" "Do I look like a clone?" Lin Yi asked. "What would a clone look like?" Gwen said. "Exactly like the person being copied?" Lin Yi said with a shrug. Maybe I do have a main body somewhere, but the truth is, I was grown in a biocultivation pod, one of many mass-produced clones used for war, slaughter, or experiments. I was made to be expendable. My existence was meant to be consumed by tests or battle, nothing more." Weiss and the others went silent. The revelation landed like something unbearably heavy. "I was accelerated out of the pod and fed with all sorts of knowledge," Lin Yi continued. "So yes, I'm different from you. I had no childhood, no parents. From the first time I opened my eyes, I could speak, walk, even do arithmetic. I could kill and follow orders. My memories were fabricated. My talents were built on the deaths of countless others like me. There were hundreds, maybe thousands of beings just like me once." He paused. The room was quiet enough to hear each breath. That was then. The organization that created me is gone now. Of all those clones, I'm the only one left. So I don't cling to the past. I'm living in the present. My past may have been rotten, but I can still try to make my present good and build a future. Lin Yi smiled gently at the girls. What did Master RWBY say? You worry about what was and what will be. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery. But today is a gift. That's why it's called the present. I guess I learned that. Weiss nodded thoughtfully. No wonder you said being a genius costs you everything. If your entire purpose was to be born for experiments or war, to be sacrificed without anyone caring, then life has no meaning. Like a lab mouse, born and killed without knowing why. So who would want to be a genius in that world? She muttered. Lin Yi smiled and looked at them. No need. They all shook their heads, awkward and a little uncomfortable. The pieces clicked into place. Why Lin Yi hated his parallel world counterpart so much. Why he had wanted that counterpart dead. Those memories, dusty, sticky things, had been stirred. The cowardice and tears of the other him had pushed a button. That guy had everything and still chose to give up. He had a world to protect, yet he handed it away. As for Lin Yi, the clone who started with nothing, he clutched at things that weren't even real. It was almost laughable. Someone with everything wanting to abandon it, while someone with nothing treasured things that didn't exist. The Street Fighter World Championship was an excuse to keep himself alive, a false life woven out of countless similar excuses. Lin Yi hated that. His whole life felt like a lie, inheriting someone else's world, pretending to be someone else. That made everything he said feel false too. But he didn't want that life. He didn't want to be an actor pretending to be a man who'd lived a lifetime. He wanted a real life of his own, to be his true self. He refused to hide forever or to accept any plea of, "I'm counting on you," that would only confirm he was playing a part. He wanted what everyone wanted, authenticity. To live in the real world as himself. That was all he wanted. 58. No longer a dream. The so-called talent had always been a burden, a constant reminder that he didn't belong to humanity, that he was a data monster born from the deaths of countless clones. His confidence was nothing more than a last straw, something he clung to with every ounce of strength he had left. He told himself over and over that he had no right to exist, yet each time that thought swept over him, some fragile illusion tugged him back, held him down, and kept him alive. Was he the strongest in the parallel world? Maybe. But why should that matter to Lin Yi? The problem was that maybe he was living someone else's life. If he, the clone, had been created from an original body, what did all of it mean? Being the strongest felt hollow if that strength might be fake. So, do you have any other questions? He asked. As long as you want to know, we'll listen. Ask anything, Raven said. Lin Yi kept his expression gentle, calm. He could tell the others were afraid to ask. Who could blame them? A past like his wasn't something most people could openly talk about. Raven and the others figured that if they had such a background, they'd hide it forever, bury it deep where no one could find it. That emptiness, that confusion, too oppressive to share. I'm sorry, Gwen said softly, rubbing her neck. Huh? Why are you apologizing? Lin Yi thought, surprised. He didn't realize how heavy his words had sounded to them. Why can you talk about all this so casually? Raven asked, easing into Lin Yi's arms. He paused a moment. Shouldn't I be the one to say it? I mean, isn't revealing the scars of your past a kind of harm to yourself? Scars? Lin Yi frowned. I don't know if I'd call it a scar or the knife that's been stuck in your chest. Maybe I've already moved past that stage. Gwen and Weiss's faces fell. They had expected something strange about Lin Yi's past, maybe wild or exotic, something like a comic book origin. They never expected this. A life built from cloning experiments, memories overwritten and stolen. It was darker, crueler than any fantasy. I just feel that if I can't tell the people I love the truth, all that's left is suspicion, worry, distrust, he continued. Distance, and then an end. I don't want to be the one left with regret. Raven's own fear surfaced. She had always been terrified that once people saw her true face, they'd push her away, call her a monster, despise her. So could she understand the joy of finding someone who accepted her? I am a demon, she had told herself. Then I will love like a demon. I am afraid, Lin Yi admitted quietly, But I'm even more afraid that everything will turn out to be an illusion. If the only way to keep you is with lies, then, from the start, everything would just have been a dream I made up. If the truth brings pain, then lies will only make it worse." The three girls were silent for a beat. Then Raven closed the distance, pressing into him. Weiss and Gwen leaned in too. "You'll never be fake to us," Raven murmured. "Our love isn't fake," Weiss added. Lin Yi let out a small, relieved breath. "So none of this is a dream," he said. "Of course not." He clung to that certainty. He hadn't been a replacement for someone else. He hadn't stolen anyone's life. He was still himself, Lin Yi. That thought gave him strength for a while, but the exhaustion he'd been suppressing finally caught up with him. The tiredness was deep, bone-weary, and he couldn't hold on any longer. He closed his eyes and sleep took him. The girls, cuddled around him, fell asleep too. Mission: scars identified. Conditions met. Dungeon opening. Dreams, like doors, revealed buried truths and secrets. Things hidden in waking life often surfaced in sleep. They slipped into the same dream, the same dungeon. All the data read normal, preparing to initiate enhancement delivery and memory copy. 3, 2, 1. Bang! Inside a row of biocultivation pods, some unawakened clones began to fail, their bodies rupturing in the nutrient fluid. Number of deaths, 9. Mortality rate, 18%. Proceed. Initiating thought training. Bang! Bang! More pods exploded as clones self-destructed. Number of deaths, 26. Mortality rate, 70%. Number of survivors this cycle, 15. Survival rate, 30%. Begin waking the test subjects. The scene shifted to darkness that slowly peeled back like a curtain, giving way to fragments of memory. A child's voice, a mother's laughter. "Xiaoyang, come here. Wow! My Xiaoyang learned to walk so fast." The view snapped as though through a baby's eyes. A small child babbling, throwing himself into his mother's arms. Then, without warning, everything fractured and switched again. "Hey, nice shot, Xiaoyang. You're my good son." A boy played basketball with his father, laughing. The memories flickered, school, classmates, teachers, each snippet clear for a heartbeat, then gone. Motion blurred, then accelerated. Then a vicious jolt like an electric shock tore through everything. Lin Yi's eyes flew open in a biopod, the culture fluid sloshing around him. The pod unlocked, and he slipped out coughing, nearly collapsing, except his body moved on instinct and he stood. His head throbbed, his memories were scrambled. One moment he had a normal day, the next, experiments, cloning rigs, consumables, the highest directive. These horrific truths flooded in and began to overwrite what he had been. "I am not Lin Xiaoyang. I am a clone." A pressure like a mountain crushed his chest as his sense of self fractured. Screams erupted around him. "No, this isn't real. Let me out. Dad, Mom, help me." "I'm not a clone. I'm Ding Yu. Save me." 5 test subjects had already broken, their minds unable to bear the sudden cascade of altered memories. Number of conscious subjects, 10. Consciousness rate, 66%. Initiating screening. The room's technicians did not hesitate. The 5 collapsed subjects were executed with controlled shots from above. "No! Don't! Let me out!" One of the remaining conscious subjects panicked and ran, only to be cut down instantly with a headshot. The surviving 9 froze. Highest directive, 1 survivor. The command was absolute. Panic turned to violence. Those 8 remaining conscious subjects, excluding Lin Yi, turned on one another in a savage, instant slaughter, driven by whatever twisted imperative the experiment had instilled. Lin Yi watched, numb, as the facility did what it had been designed to do. But Lin Yi just stood there and watched, his face blank, an endless emptiness left behind when everything is snatched away in an instant and your whole understanding of yourself is overturned. "Yeah!" someone shouted. One of the test subjects, who had already killed another, turned on Lin Yi, who'd frozen. He swung a fist toward Lin Yi's face, but in less than half a second, Lin Yi caught the punch with his left hand and clamped his right around the man's throat. Then, without hesitation, as if driven by instinct, Lin Yi snapped his neck. Crack! A gasp of amazement came from the monitoring room. Lin Yi stood dazed. The remaining subjects, terrified and desperate to survive, rushed him one by one, practically begging for death. One kicked at him. Lin Yi sidestepped, seized the kicking leg, and with a hard pull sent the man sprawling. Before he could recover, Lin Yi stomped down on his head. The monitor commentary, his reflexes and strength are impressive. Only 2 attackers were left. Realizing Lin Yi was a major threat, they tried to cooperate. The first swept low. Lin Yi anticipated it, leapt, and landed a crushing stomp that snapped the man's sweeping leg. The other threw a wide haymaker. Lin Yi leaned back to evade, caught the arm at the end of the swing, then twisted, grabbed his neck with the other hand, and pulled. Crack! Another neck snapped. He turned back to the man whose leg he'd just broken. Cold-faced, Lin Yi stamped down on the man's throat with crushing force. Crack! The man's pleading expression was meaningless. Lin Yi killed them all, emerging as the only survivor among the group. Perfect, came the dry praise in the observation room, but the fight isn't over yet. The monitors, and the sadists watching, shifted their attention to where Raven and the others were. In the dream instances they'd each been placed in, the three girls faced the same situation. A life-or-death confrontation with this monster who didn't recognize them, who'd just been born from a biopod. Surely this clone could only be a little stronger than a normal human. Defeating him should be easy. But then, in every simulation, Lin Yi's first move was to surge forward with impossible speed and lock in a chokehold. He slammed Weiss and Raven to the ground with a crushing punch. Those attempts ended in failure, both knocked out of their instances. Gwen managed to react. She dodged the initial choke and mid-backflip, caught sight of an impossibly fluid, relentless follow-up. Lin Yi wrapped around her like a coiling python. She flipped away, but a second later a hand materialized at her arm and he drove her into the ground. Boom! Gwen barely opened her eyes through the pain before a single, fatal finger jab drove into her left eye. Seconds later, the simulation failed. Gwen was killed in the instance too. By then she was fully convinced. Lin Yi moved faster than she could track. It felt inhuman, like cheating. Of course, she thought, maybe it was the result of massive experimental data pooled from countless copies and countless deaths. That at least made sense. All three girls woke with a start, blinking and staring at one another. Did you dream that too? Weiss was the first to ask. You dreamed Jack coming out of a biopod, killing the other clones, and then turning and trying to kill you? Gwen clarified. Yeah, that's what I saw. They all nodded. Weiss and Raven exchanged a shocked, wow. Gwen scratched her head. So what's actually going on? She glanced toward the sleeping Lin Yi. I don't know why, but it felt like we were dream diving into Jack's deepest memories. Raven understood the idea at least on some level. His deepest memories. That's horrible, Weiss said, remembering the sensation. Being an ordinary kid, then waking up and realizing everything was fake, then being ripped out of that dark place and forced to kill others like you. Oh my God, I'd go insane, Gwen said. She couldn't imagine how Lin Yi had lived through it. But look at him now. Does he look like someone who's been through all that? The three of them looked at Lin Yi, who was still smiling in his sleep, lost in a pleasant dream. Mutters and soft chuckles came from him. Hey, ladder first. World Championship qualifying. I'm a genius. His obsession with Street Fighter hadn't left him. Even in these stolen moments, he was picturing a comeback with Jimmy, a flashy finish after drinks and flirting. If he never got to play Street Fighter in this world, that might become his eternal regret. What the hell is he dreaming about? Weiss asked, bewildered. World Championship? Gwen frowned. Do the clones compete? Fighting, killing, experiments, not enough. They have to fight to entertain those monsters too? Jack's life is miserable. Gwen sighed. Raven shook her head. No, don't you get the feeling this is another layer? Another memory? It could even mean Jack has a split personality, Weiss said, imagination running wild. What if the Jack we see is just his surface self, and he has some hidden personality we don't know about? Gwen brightened. Yeah, like what if his other self is a cold, ruthless vampire type? Or a brooding, mysterious older man with a tragic past, Raven offered. I'm thinking a gloomy, world-weary tsundere goth, Weiss said. No. The three of them kept tossing out increasingly fanciful versions of Jack's other personality, utterly uninterested in the darker truth. They were far more excited at the thought of some dramatic transformation that might be even more alluring than the quiet, sleeping boy in front of them. Weiss frowned and huddled close to Gwen and Raven, whispering over the sleeping Lin Yi. How old do you think Jack really is now? That depends on how you count, Gwen said, picking up a stray snack as she spoke. Do you count from the moment he was cloned, Or do you add the years he remembers from his past life to that? Raven rolled her eyes. Who cares? He's asleep. Just don't wake him. Weiss rubbed her stomach. I'm starving. I don't normally get hungry at night, but I am tonight, Gwen smiled. Maybe we were too active today? Me? Weiss snapped. I always get hungry at night. Being a superhero means I burn so much energy fighting crime. I keep food in the fridge for nights like this. Gwen pressed her small feet together and laughed. I don't usually do late-night snacks. I'm trying not to bulk up. Don't want to ruin my figure. Weiss paused, then pinched her flat stomach proudly. See? No flab. I'm actually worried I'm getting too muscular lately. Gwen unbuttoned the hem of her shirt and showed off the beginnings of abs. Look, finally some definition. Raven and Weiss admired her. You're such a tomboy potential, Raven teased. Weiss grinned. Say the word and I'll get embarrassed. Gwen flushed and pulled her shirt back down. Stop staring, though actually, aren't you curious about Jack's body? That name, Jack, cut the air. Weiss's eyes widened. Raven's cheeks, too, went pink. They'd all seen him in memories once. Gwen and Weiss were openly curious, and Raven had already been intimate with him. She fancied herself above their gawks, but the memory had left its mark. Lin Yi slept on, unaware. Gwen shrugged, nibbling at a skewer. We already saw bits of him in the memories, but this was a long time ago. People change. We should check, Weiss said. For his sake, too, what if something changed and he needs help? If Jack has some hidden condition we missed, it could be important. Raven arched a brow. So you two are suddenly doctors? You just want an excuse. Weiss and Gwen exchanged flustered looks. Raven sighed. You're not fooling anyone. You're looking to satisfy your curiosity. Face it, she continued, softer. We've been close to him. We're in this kind of relationship already. Why pretend otherwise? Weiss and Gwen froze. The line about this kind of relationship hung between them, awkward and dangerous. Raven's expression tightened, hurt flickering into something sharper. Sometimes I worry I'm the only one who feels this way, like I'm the only one who remembers what that means. The girl's panic was instant. No, Raven, that's not it. They rushed to reassure her, words tumbling out. We aren't pretending. We're in this relationship too, 100%. Don't think we'd ever leave you out. They wrapped Raven in a clumsy hug. Raven unwound, sighing helplessly, then cracked a small smile. Fine, I forgive you. Weiss and Gwen brightened. Really? You'll forgive us? On one condition, Raven said, deadpan. Oh? They both leaned in. You each owe me a kiss. That did it. The three of them giggled, trading quick, affectionate pecks to seal the truce. The tension dissolved like breath on glass. Then they turned back to Lin Yi, whispering, conspiratorial. Inch by inch, like schoolgirls peeking at a crush, they eased his shirt up. A collective, stunned hush fell over them. Oh my God, Gwen breathed. He's sculpted. I could stare at this for hours, Weiss murmured. Raven licked her lips. Can we just look a bit lower? They giggled like teenagers, pointing out muscles and lines, admiring the way his body had formed. Their whispers were full of awe and awkward, guilty excitement. Outside their warm circle, the rest of the apartment was quiet, the city night soft and distant. Inside his dream, Lin Yi was having a very different kind of battle. He was in the arcade again, fingers slamming the joystick, engaged in a feverish Street Fighter match against Jamie. What? I have to take on Jury, Fire, and Chun-Li with one life? Lin Yi muttered in his sleep, brow furrowing. Wasn't this supposed to be Street Fighter? Why is it a King of Fighters rule set now? One voice in the dream argued back in his head. 1 versus 3. Is this tournament real or fake? As the dream pressure mounted, so did his pulse. Sweat beaded across Lin Yi's forehead. The video game became chaotic. Combos, counters, the shrink-and-flare panic of someone suddenly finding the rules rearranged mid-battle. He gripped the invisible controller harder, lips pursed, shouting commands no one else could hear. What is this guy talking about? He blurted out between jabs, half confusion, half protest, just as the three girls leaned in, their faces lit by moonlight and mischief.